So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first session and presenters of the day. So my colleagues Alice Hartigan and Wyndham Chalmers, our WAM project officers, are going to speak to you about making the most out of your placement. We'll then have Philip Carroll, our senior WAM project officer, speaking with Coleman O'Carroll, who is a past WAM graduate. Coleman works in the civil service in the Department of Social Protection and sits on the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team. He's been a wonderful representative for the WAM programme at a number of events and features in our upcoming video series about WAM. So thank you all very much for joining us today. I'm going to hand over now to Alice and Wyndham to kick things off.
Thanks so much, Bamba. I will go ahead and share our slides there. Can you see those okay? Perfect.
Yeah, I can see it on mine. Yeah.
Perfect. I will go ahead and introduce myself and Alice then. So we're going to get things started today with a short presentation just about getting the most out of your placement and what you can do during the placement process to help you prepare to get the most out of it, but also afterwards. So like Bamba said, it's myself and my colleague Alice that will be presenting this, and we're both project officers on the WAM team. So I am just going to kick things off with a short activity. Now it's going to be a little bit different because we're not in person chatting to each other, but if people want to maybe think about these questions and pop them some answers into the chat box, if you're comfortable, I'll leave it for a couple of minutes. So this is something that I like to do for a reflection. So it's called a rosebud and thorn activity. So rose would be what has been your highlight so far. What's been the best thing that's happened in your placement, or what's the thing that you're most proud of? Bud is what's the thing that you're most looking forward to, what's coming up, or what's one goal that you have set for yourself. And then thorn is what's a challenge that you faced and how did you overcome it. So I might just have a peek at the chat there and see if anyone has shared anything. There's no pressure to share, but it's just if you're comfortable. So an example of something like a bud would be, I want to work on my presentation skills, or something that could be a rose, what your highlight has been would be that you worked on a specific project and it was successful. So things like that. Don't know, let's see. Does it look like there's anything coming into the chat? So I might just leave it and ask people to kind of reflect on that in their own time. Alice and I are going to talk a little bit more about goal setting throughout the presentation. So it might be something to come back to just as an exercise on your own time. So then moving forward, let's look at what goal setting actually is. So when you're trying to set a goal, there's a few points that you do want to think about. So obviously setting a goal is determining a desired outcome or an end point for yourself. So what do you want to achieve and how do you want to get there? So it's also the act of putting an action plan into place. It's not just saying that I want to achieve this one thing. It's determining what steps you need to take to get to that point. And when you're setting goals, you should take the time to be quite deliberate and intentional with what your goals are. The clearer you are, the easier it will be for you to set an action plan for yourself. So how do you actually go about setting a goal? There's a few ways that you can do this, but there's a couple of structures that you might be familiar with, or we'll talk through now. So when you're setting a goal, you want to make sure that it's something that's achievable. So we always talk about this as setting SMART goals. Now, SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timed. So you want to be specific, be very clear in what your goal is. You also want it to be a measurable goal. How are you going to determine success for yourself? What measure do you have, or what outcomes do you need to be able to say, I've achieved this goal? You also want to make sure it's something that's attainable and relevant. Make sure that it's something that you can achieve in the time period that you have, but also is relevant to the work that you're doing or your personal and professional goals. And then timed, you want to set a time frame for yourself. And this could be next week, I want to do this, or in the next month, I want to do this, but set an end point for yourself where you can come back and reflect on how far you've gotten on that goal. You also want to think about your journey. How are you going to get there, and what will that be like while you're trying to achieve these goals? So a way to think about this is something called the GROW model for goal setting. And GROW is another acronym. This stands for goal, current reality, options and obstacles, and will or way. So your goal is obviously the endpoint that you want to achieve. And then you want to look at your current reality. So where are you now? And then what obstacles might you face along the way, or what options do you have to help you achieve that goal? And then will or way is what actions you'll actually take to achieve that goal. So those two pair together really well, where SMART might actually help you set your goal. Grow is something that can help you think about your action plan along the way. So, a couple more points just related to goal setting are to take daily action. This not only helps you move towards your goal, but it creates momentum for you as you're moving forward. And those little steps that you take will all add up to helping you achieve your goal. You also want to hold yourself accountable and maintain your focus on the goal. It's really easy to get distracted or become overwhelmed when you face obstacles, and that is completely natural. Everybody has that experience at some point, but you want to hold yourself accountable to always coming back to working on that goal. And then the last thing here is, while we all want to reach that big endpoint, hit the target at the end, and reach your goal, you want to make sure that you're celebrating those little victories along the way, whether that's celebrating at the first 50%, the first 10%, 90% of the way there. Give yourself time to take a step back, reflect on what you've achieved, and celebrate those small victories. I'm going to pass it now over to Alice, and she's going to talk about engaging with your mentor during the WAM program.
Great. Thanks so much, Wyndham, for that. Yeah, and I think the kind of goals and the different models you spoke about, grow and smart, is going to be really helpful when we're talking about mentoring, actually. So I'm going to talk a bit about like engaging with your mentor. So firstly, let's just talk about like what is mentoring. And a very standard definition would be that it's a learning partnership between two colleagues. Now, typically, this will be a partnership between a more experienced colleague and a less experienced colleague, so that the person with more experience can share their knowledge with the less experienced colleague so that they can grow in the workplace. But it's really a space to reflect and, as we've just talked about, set goals. So it's really helpful in the mentoring relationship, especially in the WAM process, because the places that you're working in are maybe 6 months, 12 months. Some of them could be graduate programs for 2 years, but there is an end point. So, goals can be really helpful to help you grow in that placement along the way. And some really helpful things to think about in mentoring. And one of them is boundary management. And there's a really great way of doing this is actually using the mentoring agreement. So the mentoring agreement can actually be found in the e-learning suite that you would have signed up to when you first started your placement. And if you haven't accessed that, or you're not remembering how you can access that, you can always get in touch with us afterwards and we can maybe send you a reminder. And we can also send you the mentoring agreement as well if you need it. But it's essentially like a Word document that you can bring to your mentor and just have a chat about kind of, what goals you want to set together, maybe. What are you going to talk about at each meeting? When do you expect to meet? And it can really give you a structure around the mentoring relationship that can really be helpful. And it really does help you kind of manage the boundaries there as well in the workplace. And something that's important to remember in mentoring is that it is still a professional working relationship. So, in mentoring, sometimes we can become quite close with people because we're sharing our worries and our fears and our goals for our career. But it is still a professional relationship. So just remember that, the topics should be about kind of you growing in the workplace. And also, importantly, don't expect mentors to, I suppose, advocate for you or do work on your behalf. Really, the mentoring relationship should give you a lot of confidence so that you can go out and self-advocate for yourself. So the mentor is really there as a sounding board, I guess, for you to talk about those goals, talk about those fears, but actually give you the confidence to do that on your own. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more just about mentoring as well. So asking for feedback. So it's a big part of mentoring, or at least maybe it should be. Feedback is the best way to grow and to learn and develop in the workplace. So like, how can we do this? Well, a great way of asking for feedback is really to focus on the future and self-development. So, where do you see yourself in the next year? And then we can go back to these models that Wyndham spoke about, the grow model. Where do you see yourself and how are you going to get there? What are the obstacles to getting there? And that way you can actually bring those challenges to the mentoring relationship and talk about how we're going to tackle them. So you can focus on the future when you're asking for feedback. Importantly, and maybe practically, really take note of what is said, and kind of reflect on what your mentor is telling you. I think a great way of doing this could be a reflective journal. A lot of people like to do that in the evenings, just note down a few things you thought about the day. You know, in a year then time, you can look back on that, and it can be really helpful for your self-development and also for your confidence, because you can look back a year previously and see, wow, this is where I was and I've learned so much since then. And I can't believe I was worried about that thing because now I feel fine doing that. So that can be a really nice exercise for you to do. And really importantly, just kind of be open and listen to receiving feedback. It can be kind of daunting and it can be very a vulnerable experience, but it's the best way to grow and to develop. And you know how to establish and build a strong relationship with your mentor. Some kind of simple tools is to prepare for meetings. It sounds obvious, but again, the mentoring agreement can really help with this. Is what do we want to talk about? You know, have a good structure for it, set those goals, and have topics ready for when you're going in so that you make the best use of maybe those 30-40 minutes that you're spending with your mentor. And lastly, you know, just be open, honest, and professional, and be kind of willing to adapt and learn as you're growing in the workplace. So it's just a few tips there on mentoring and how really that relationship in work and on your WAM placement can really benefit you if you engage in it fully. So we just want to talk a little bit about kind of learning in the workplace, but the next step anxiety that we can get. So we know that a lot of WAM grads, when they're coming towards the end of their placement, can feel anxious, and that's completely normal. It's a big change, and you know there might be a lot of questions: what will happen next? What opportunities are there for me out there? But it's really important just to remember and focus on the positives. You know, what did you learn in the time that you were there? Did you achieve those goals? You can look back on those goals and say, did I achieve that? Hopefully you did, and that's a really great learning experience. But even if you didn't, that's still a great learning experience. You know, what challenges were in my way? Maybe it wasn't attainable, or maybe something came up that I didn't expect. So really focusing on the positives and how you can grow from the experience is really important. Um, Practically, like, what did you learn? Remember to update your CV with all the experience you've gained from your WAM placement, because that's really going to help you moving forward, hopefully in the mainstream workplace and getting, you know, securing work independently outside of WAM. Um, Importantly, just to look after yourself in the process of change. And at this point, we just wanted to let people know that we actually do, in the coming weeks, we'll have a new guide. It's a workplace wellness guide for students and grads with disabilities that some of the team and more so Bamba actually has worked on. And it's a really great publication, and we're hoping that'll become available in the next week or so. So you guys should keep an eye on that on our website, because it's going to be really helpful. But I'll just finish by saying that what might be interesting for people to know is that 81% of WAM graduates do secure employment as a direct result of their placement. And so I hope that would give people confidence and positive energy leaving their placement, knowing that a lot of people from WAM do take what they've learned, you know, update their CV, take the positive experience, and do secure work afterwards within the first year. So that's kind of a short presentation from we and Wyndham today. If you guys do have any questions, or you want that mentoring agreement, or you want to know a little bit more about, you know, the GROW model, you can reach out to us at wam@ahead.ie. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Philip, who's going to be talking with the WAM graduate about their experience. So it's going to be a really great session learning from the kind of personal lived experience and how they've used that moving forward in their career.
I think you're on
Philip,
mute.
you're just on mute.
Very sorry. I was saying thank you, Alice. I think we're going to do a little tech check to make sure that Coleman microphone is working. Coleman, if you can hear me, can you turn on your microphone, please?
I think he's still having issues, Philip.
Okay.
I've been talking to Coleman on the phone. Hi everyone, my name is Deirdre. I work with the guys on the WAM and Get Ahead team, and Coleman is very disappointed. He's having an issue with his microphone, so we might need to go to our backup plan, if that's okay, Philip.
Yes, sure.
So, Philip, we are very lucky to have a previous WAM graduate working in the WAM team, and that's Philip. So Philip has had a WAM placement and is now currently employed in the AHEAD team as our senior WAM project officer. So the plan was for Philip to interview Coleman, but we're really lucky that we can kind of flip it around and reverse roles. And I'm going to interview Philip and ask him some questions about his experience of having a WAM placement in the past, and I guess what he learned, and maybe some tips for those of you that are currently on placements or are going to be finishing up shortly. So welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Philip, will you tell us a little bit about your WAM placement, where it was, and I suppose where you're currently working? I've answered some of that, but if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so I did a placement in 2018, so it's a long time ago now. And I was placed in HSE. So I had a 1-year placement in HSE. I was assigned to a department originally called Workplace Health and Wellbeing. So that was more aligned with my educational background. So I did my degree in psychology. So I was delighted that that was my placement. Then about a week before my placement started, I was actually moved because of business needs within HSE. So I was moved to a department which was called the National Doctors Training and Planning. And they had a huge project that they were working on. And it was a baptism of fire, to put it simply. It was a huge project. There was a lot of court cases going around it, and we had a very definite deadline that we had to work towards, and we had like 3,500 applications to work through in a very short period of time. So that I was initially disappointed by that, because it took me away from what I thought was going to be, something more aligned with my career or my educational background. But in the end, though, it was actually something that was really beneficial for me, because it taught me a lot of transferable skills that I was able to bring into subsequent roles that I had, especially about working under pressure. Like, there was an insane amount of pressure to get through so many applications, fresh out of college, very green, not knowing what the expectations of the workplace were. So I had to kind of learn to stand on my own 2 feet very quickly. So I'm very grateful for that. So then after that, then I kind of decided that I wanted to go back to college. So after my placement finished, also around the time I knew there wasn't possibilities for extensions, because it was a structured 12-month contract, but there was also a hiring embargo was placed on HSE at that time. So I knew there wasn't any opportunities for me to stay in the HSE. So I decided then the next step for me was to go back and to kind of move into a master's level. So that's what I did. Subsequently then went into social care after my master's, worked there for 2 years, and then saw an opportunity opened with the WAM Programme. So I was delighted to apply for that, to come full circle, to come back to a place that gave me my start in workplace. And I've been here now about 2.5 years. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind journey, but I've loved every second of it.
Brilliant. And I think the point you made about the transferable skills, you go in to do a particular job and you kind of have that in your mind, and what you're going to achieve at the end of it. But you really have to kind of nearly change your train of thought, I suppose, to actually, this isn't how I expect it to be, but I'm going to learn something here that I will bring into the future. And you did that, and you use those skills going forward. So I think that's a really important point. So I suppose Alice and Wyndham spoke about the mentoring model, that's part of the WAM program, in that everyone that's on a placement is assigned a mentor. And I suppose this person is usually a very valuable source of information and knowledge, and helps somebody settle into a role and I suppose benefit more from the role around setting goals or learning the culture of the organization or networking more. So what was your relationship with your manager like? And maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about how maybe you built that relationship and how it benefited you in the placement, but going forward as well.
Yeah. So as I said, my original placement was supposed to be somewhere else. So my mentor was actually in the original place that I was assigned to. So I wasn't in the same building as my mentor, and I certainly wasn't on the same team. So I had a logistical challenge of getting from one side of Dublin City to the other side of Dublin City to meet my mentor, which did have its issues to trying to explain that to my manager as to, well, I have to take, 45 minutes to travel, 45 minutes for a meeting, and then 45 minutes to travel back. So that had its initial challenges. My manager changed quite a lot as well because of the nature of the project. So I kind of had to do this multiple disclosure all throughout my placement of new manager comes in and I have to explain the program I came in from and why a mentor exists. So that was challenging in itself, but then it taught me a lot about advocating for myself. So I had to, if I wanted to be able to benefit from the experience of a mentor, I had to be able to advocate for myself as to why I need to go and meet my mentor. So my mentor was somebody who had a disability themselves. So I found that very useful for me because I knew that someone who was giving me their experience and their knowledge was coming from somewhere that they could empathize with me. They knew where I was coming from and I knew where they were coming from. So what I found really helpful was in, say, the first maybe month or so, especially the first 2 months, I saw my mentor more than I would have towards the end of my placement. But those first couple of months and those couple of meetings were really helpful for me to kind of know that I have an ally there, and it's not just, I'm not just a WAM graduate that's kind of dumped into a big organization and I get lost there, that I had somebody I could bounce ideas off. So as my placement went on, we met less and less, but we would converse by email then instead. So maybe like once every 2 or 3 weeks, we might exchange emails, and if I had any issues, I would kind of bounce ideas off her, things like that. But I found that the more that I was actually self-advocating for myself, the less I actually needed the mentor. And I appreciate that wouldn't be the same for everybody, but that was kind of my experience.
Yeah, and that's what you benefit from. And especially when there is so much change happening for you with managers, and obviously the role was different as well. So learning that skill to advocate, because no one else was going to do that, I guess, for you. You had to learn to do that yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the other side of it as well as the manager, my mentor, wasn't pushing her support on me, and I know for myself, if somebody was constantly in contact with me, it would probably push me away a little bit. But I found her approach was very gentle, and it was very much a kind of, well, I'm not going to chase after you, but I'm here if you want to talk to me. And I found that approach really helpful as well.
And I suppose I'm just thinking about sometimes maybe the mentor mightn't be very proactive. When we've new graduates starting a WAM placement, it seems like you were quite proactive in reaching out to the graduate or to the mentor and going to meet them. Would you have any tips for people maybe that are a bit unsure how to start that mentoring relationship and how to make contact at the start if the mentor is not doing that, so that they can really benefit from having a mentor?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on each person. Some people will be more maybe confident to approach someone in person, maybe during lunch or something like that. You might introduce yourself. Other people might want to do it through an email, and I think that's fine as well. But I think just introduce yourself in whatever medium that's coming through, and then just outlining that you would like to meet them and that you would really benefit from having a conversation with them. If for whatever reason, if that mentor doesn't reply or maybe has moved jobs or has left the organization, it's really important then that the graduate comes back to WAM and lets us know.
Tells us,
so
because
that
there
we
could be a
can,
reason.
Yeah, exactly. So there may be a reason that the graduate doesn't know, or maybe even the graduate's manager might not know. Like if you even think about my case, how would my manager know that someone in a different part of the HSE had left? They wouldn't have known. So
Very true.
yeah, we can definitely then scope that out and see if there's somebody else who can step in and share their
Yeah.
experience.
And I suppose, you know, from my experience of being in WAM, usually the mentors are people that have kind of either been asked because there's somebody that would be interested in mentoring, or they're already mentoring people within the workplace. So they're generally interested in the role and would love to be approached, I guess, as well, to make sure that the graduate is getting what they need, especially for the shorter term placements. So I suppose, Philip, moving back to kind of, did you set any goals when you started your placement? Can you remember? And how did you go about achieving those?
You know, my goals were very, very simple. I was so stressed about starting my career. You know, I was so worried that an employer wouldn't be accommodating of me, or wouldn't understand me, or so like my goal really was to just be able to start a career. That's my only goal, was to just get my foot in the door, um, and you know, to get to the end of the contract. That was very, very simple goals that I had. But I think that kind of changed very, very quickly when, you know, I realized after like 2 or 3 months that I wasn't going to be fired, or I wasn't going to be not accommodated. And I started learning my own self-advocacy skills, that then I have to start thinking about, well, what was the next step? So, and then at that point it was clear that there wasn't going to be extensions or stuff like that. So I needed to start thinking outside the box. Yeah, I was trying to apply for other roles and stuff like that, but then I kind of saw that, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for me to go back and build upon my education experience,
Yeah.
kind of based off what I was learning in the workplace. So I thought there was just, I won't go bore you with the details of it, but I just saw that there was an opportunity for me, that now that I built confidence in myself, to be able to bring that confidence back to education, so that I could then bring that confidence from education back into the workplace in maybe a higher type of role, in a more, you know, something that was more in line with my education. So I know it's a very simple answer, but like when I go back to, I remember that before I ever heard of WAM, I remember just 3, 4 months out from graduation, I wouldn't call it a panic attack, but I was just, how am I going to start a career? And Googling disability employment Ireland, and then WAM came up. So my baseline level was very, very low as to what my expectation and my goals were for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe
And it
that in
might seem like
hindsight.
a simple goal, but it's actually probably a very important one, isn't it? It's around, okay, I want to get in the door of employment and get some experience, build my confidence, and then think about what are the next steps. But it seems like you learned a lot just through the process, even of kind of looking for work and getting started, and then thinking about the future.
I think in hindsight, though, that the fact that my bar for myself was quite low, it meant that I wasn't trying to achieve an unattainable goal. You know, if I went in and was like, you know, I want to achieve A, B, C, D, and then I didn't do that, then I would feel like I failed. So anything above me being able to start a career was an added bonus in my eyes.
Good. I suppose something we hear a lot from graduates is, you know, they're on a WAM placement, and it's a fixed term contract, and they really love the work, they're really enjoying it, they'd love the opportunity to stay on. And as you just mentioned there, when you were coming towards the end of college, you were getting a bit unsure and kind of, how am I going to start my career? I suppose I want to mirror that when you're actually in a WAM placement and you're coming towards the end of it. It can be quite an uncertain time for people. Even if they're, I suppose, know that it's coming to an end. So would you have any kind of tips around how they might stay focused on the work to get the best out of the remaining time, and also to, I suppose, start planning or gentle planning around next steps?
Yeah, so definitely. First thing that comes to my mind is, you know, you need to leverage the skills that you've learned, to be able to build a kind of a profile of competencies. So that was something that I was very conscious of, because I was working on a project that was moving very, very, very fast. So a skill that I might learn today, if I didn't document that within 2 or 3 weeks, then I'd be on to another part of the project, and that competency, the knowledge of it would start to get a bit kind of murky. So as I was coming towards the end of my placement, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to document, okay, well, what are my leadership examples? You know, what would example of that competency be? What would it be an example of? How I worked as a part of a team, or, you know, when did I go above and beyond what my job was for the benefit of the team? Those types of competencies. So
yes, you're building a little bit of a, I suppose, a database of kind of your competencies and your capabilities, so that when you're then applying for roles, whether it's through application or doing an interview, you can pull off those examples. Yeah,
and they're
and they
very fresh
really,
then.
yeah, they're fresh and they're live examples. That's a really good tip. I think we're going to finish up, but I suppose, is there anything you'd like to say as a final word, or any last bit of advice you'd like to give the people on the call around kind of their current placement and thinking about next steps?
Well, enjoy it. That's the first thing I'll say. You know, it's a really great opportunity, and, you know, try not to think too far into the future, because when we think too far into the future, we forget about what we're doing right now and the opportunity that we have right now. So be a sponge, soak it all up, make the most of it, and I guarantee you, in a few years' time, you'll be looking back on this experience, and you'll be thinking, oh, why did I not do this, or why did I not do that? Just enjoy the moment and learn as much as you can while you have the opportunity, and everything else after that will fall into place.
Yeah, it'll happen for you. Thank you, Philip. And I know Bamba put in the chat there, Philip has written a blog all around advocating it for yourself in work. So that's definitely worth a read. And there's some other really good blogs on there in relation to disability and the workplace. So definitely jump on and have a look. But thank you, Philip. And we
Thank
love
you very
working
much.
with Philip. He brings great skills and personality to the team. And I guess many of you probably have had some contact with him over your placement. So thanks, Philip, for stepping in, and also to Coleman for being available in the background. We'll get you next time, Coleman, to talk to us.